This week we get to chat with Kaylee Zheng of the AML fame. We talk all things model trains, mobile phone speakers, Lionel Strang and everything between. Let's get started. Welcome aboard, Kaylee Zheng. Thanks for taking some time away from your modelling this evening to talk to me on model railroad techniques.
Yeah, thank you, Jazzy, for having me here. This is awesome.
Yeah, this is great. I'm really looking forward to this. Obviously, I've been listening to you and the crew on AML for quite a while, and we won't go too much about that. But I think it's your time to we'll have a bit of a chat about one Lionel Strang, because he probably would like to give you a bit of a hard time as well, as we call it in Australia. So, mechanical engineer in the aviation industry is my understanding. For Pratt and Whitney. Is that still correct? Or yeah.
Yep, that's still correct. Yep. I don't work for Pratt directly, but I am I do work for them, but I'm not a direct employee for them, so I'm just a contractor for them.
Yeah, nice. Does that give you a lot of modelling time still?
It does. It actually does, because it doesn't ties me down for like Pratt. So if there's an emergency, typically the Pratt people have to take care of it.
Yeah.
But usually I clean up the aftermath, but that's besides the fact. But there is a nice buffer, so it does actually keep me a more regular 40-hour schedule.
Nice. That's what I like. So you appear to be an avid photographer as well. You like getting out there, and so you like doing. You've sent a few photos through, and we'll put those up shortly when I put it back into post. So trains and sort of what sort of photography do you like doing? I suppose that's
a good question, actually, because it's so kind of my background. How I got into trains, right? Is that my parents, when I was growing up and I was really young, a wee little lass, we had an apartment that was right across. We're pretty close to the track side, but I remember being able to stare out into the open and watch trains go out in the morning and pretty much all day long. And that's really what started my love for trains. And just kind of going forward, I actually do get more enjoyment. I mean, I do like modeling, but I do like watching trains just as much. So that's how kind of the photography kind of came into it. I just like to kind of compose and whatnot. But as far as any like specific style, I think it's hard to kind of categorize, because I originally started out wanting to do kind of like scenery shots, big wide expanses, but what I end up finding in a lot of my photos, it tends to be like close-ups, almost like a portraiture of like the equipment. Occasionally I'm lucky enough to get people, and then I think there were a couple where I sent to you where there's a lot of times young kids kind of getting involved into trains, or parents showing kids, teaching them to wave, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So I like kind of getting that humanity aspect of it.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, I had a friend named Ken Carlos, and he tells that it gives a sense of time and place.
Sure.
That's kind of his model, and that's kind of what I try to capture in the photos, is that sense of time and place. You know, you have a time. You can obviously tell from scenery what season it is, and the amount of daylight, whether it's high noon or sunset. Sure. But also just kind of it gives that a sense of emotion to the picture.
Yeah.
Like when you see, I think there's one photo, one of my early photos I took. There's a train coming, but you see the kid with his hands around his ears, with one close in the fist, because he was just doing the pull the air horn sign.
Yeah.
So and you kind of get that from looking at that photo, that sense of awe that the kid is experiencing. So that's what I tried to kind of do in my photographs. It started out being a scenery person, but I've become more and more of a portraiture type of person.
Yeah, nice. It's quite an interesting. I'm sort of just getting into a little bit of not photography in the real world, but photography on model railways, I suppose, on my train. Just trying different angles to, as you say, to get a different sort of emotion to it, because it's obviously it's a very. The medium comes across as very one-dimensional, but as you say, if you add those little, it's just that snapshot in time can add It's almost four-dimensional because you're showing
Right.
the child's emotion at the time, and it's fantastic. And one classic photo that you did send to me is, I think it was you as a little girl standing trackside. That was absolutely gorgeous. So thank you for sending that through. That was
Thank you.
that was very much one of those photos you speak of. Just the utter joy that you're standing trackside, and obviously you've grown to love your trains from there, which is fantastic.
Right, exactly. Although, funny enough, you say that because in that one particular photo, it almost looks like, why am I doing here?
It doesn't come across that way. It's like a pure love of trains, but I suppose that's what they say. A photo can speak 1,000 words, depending on what 1,000 words you would like it to speak, and the perception of that individual at the time, isn't it? So, which is great. So, still incorporated with, is it Tom's train? Oh, no, Tony's trains, isn't it? Not Tom's trains, Tony's trains.
It is Tom's. It is
Tom's
trains.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So what do you do? What do you do with them?
So actually how I all started out there, Tom's is a local hobby shop in the Connecticut, West Hartford area. So it originally started with me just kind of going out over there just to hang out or just to shop. Well, actually, it started with me just shopping. Then I started just hanging out, and then became from hanging out, started helping him out with customers here and there, and then it became a little more where I actually started taking on projects for other people, mostly DCC installs, but occasionally do get some like repairs and that type of thing. And then, and that's pretty much what I deal with mostly. I do some, I'm still there on the weekends for the most part, but most of my work, most of my time is actually working on doing repairs and DCC installs for other people.
Yeah, sure. So I've never worked in a model train shop, but I've spent a lot of time in them. I'm assuming the pay that you get just goes straight into your hobby anyway. So it could be a little bit dangerous in that. A little bit dangerous, couldn't it? So
exactly.
I overspend a little bit, but that's what we do it for. We work hard to spend our money on our hobbies, which is great. So how are you finding, there's obviously a lot of commentary around, take the COVID rubbish out of it, because I don't want to dwell on that too much, but the bricks and mortar store, I suppose, there's a lot of commentary around. What's your opinion on how they're going and moving forward, how they're going to keep growing, I suppose, within the hobby, if they are at all, I suppose, is the next thing.
Yeah, and that's a good question, because we hear a lot of hobby stores closing out, but I equally hear just as much hobby stores that's opening up. I think and we kind of touched upon this on the A Modeler's Life podcast, is that a lot of the stores are now starting to kind of evolve. It used to be the brick and mortar, you open it, you put very little on the website to kind of just entice people to come to the brick and mortars to kind of browse around. But I think we're starting to see the opposite, where you put a lot on the website, and that entices people to come into the brick and mortar, because you just can't put everything there. You can put a lot of the stuff, but I think there's also there's traffic that says, hey, we got used stuff that we can't post, and that's driving in. So I think the people who have a strong web presence tends to be very much more capable of surviving into the future.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously that's become more and more apparent with the current world events as well, hasn't it? So if you didn't have a strong web presence before, I think they may struggle into the future, because they'll be playing catch up with everyone who does have that great online store. So
right, exactly. But I think it also, people are saying like hobby stores are completely done. I don't quite agree with that. I think hobby stores are still very much important, because they still serve one key factor that you can't do online, and that's like a congregation spot, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's kind of like Cheers, the bar at Cheers. That one feature, I think, is very hard to replace, even though you may have clubs, you may have all these other things, right? But the fact that it's unstructured is what makes it special and hard to replace. So I think we still have brick and mortars. It may not be to the same scope and extent that we used to seeing. I don't know how it is down where you are, but at least here in the States, it used to be the old idea of a hobby store was you have a tiny little hole, but it's just jam packed with everything. Yeah, I think you're going to see more strategic more strategic type products, more display cases type things, and then some of the odds and ends are kind of shuffled off to the website or something along those lines.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting point. It's sort of like a meeting point for, the fellowship of the hobby, so to speak, with, obviously we've had to now evolve. Gordy and Co. with NMRA I think it's just fantastic initiative that the gentlemen have come along with, and obviously you've done a clinic on there about your DCC sound speakers, which we'll get on with us in a sec. So I really can't see that side of things going away in the near future, even once we are over all this COVID schmozzle that we're currently in. But I just think it's a great way forward, and great, as I said, great initiative. I had Gordy on the show a few months back and had a chat to him about it. So what's your thoughts, I suppose, with moving forward with the virtual online world, I suppose, doing this type of video podcasting and everything else in between?
It's going to be interesting because I know, like right now, because of the whole COVID situation, right? It makes a lot of sense. You're able to kind of still interact, like we're able to have this tonight. But at the same time, I think we're gonna start hitting a saturation. Yeah. Because one of the things about this hobby is that it is a very physical hobby. I think the online stuff is great. Don't get me wrong, Gordy's doing a phenomenal job with it. I mean, and certainly is bringing a lot of attention to NMRA, which I think they've been struggling to do that for quite some time. But I think what we're going to start seeing is that the online events may become more routine. And then our attendance levels might slightly to kind of reduce down a little bit, only simply because we're starting to hit that saturation, I think, from just being constantly on the screen, especially in the hobby that is really intended to be designed to take you away from the screen.
Yeah, that's right. So, more tactile. That's right. So I think it's good in some regards, the whole online, purely because I'm hoping it gets the youth younger than people than myself. I'm 45, and you obviously a lot younger than what I am, and obviously now we're getting the young fellas like Drew come through at 15 years of age. I think if the hobby's done correctly, and hats off to him to throwing himself on the sword like people are making content like this. But
absolutely.
It's got, if you look at it for the youth, they're very, very tech savvy. Obviously, that's your passion is the tech side of things, and it's a bit of a passion of mine as well. I think that's how we're going to get the youngsters into this hobby to thrive with the tech, with the virtual hangouts and whatever else we got going on here.
Exactly. Yeah, because and I talked about this on another program where we often talk about barriers of entry, but we don't really talk about barriers of exit. Yeah. So right now, for someone coming into the hobby, right, we have a moderate, it's steep barrier of entry. It's not unreachable, but it is a little higher than typical. But barrier of exit is so low, right? Because it doesn't take much to find, okay, well, I don't want to do this. I could do this, right? We have phones, we have whatever other technology, other priorities that could easily redirect us. So I think we can, with the ability to start integrating more things, right? We're starting to see things from a more systematic approach rather than the more traditional, okay, you focus on this, then you focus on this, then you focus on this, and then so on and so forth. Yeah. We're starting to see that change. We're starting to see people diversify, but also people tend to centralize, like within a certain skill set. People hone in on it. So model railroading is going to become more of a community-based hobby as opposed to a solo-based hobby, like it was in years past.
Yeah. No, you're definitely right there. So sort of this has opened my world up just doing this video podcasting and various other bits and bobs, meeting sort of people from all over the United States and the world for that matter, in Germany and Scotland with Gordy, and yourself in the United States and a few others that I've interviewed of late. So I think it's quite an interesting time moving forward, because I think obviously we're just, is it Amherst that has since been cancelled? Is it Amherst? There was another big event, which is, I've never been to these events, but I've seen some of the footage and it's just like, we don't have anything like that in Australia. And it's quite ironic that we're actually meant to be in the United States right now on a family holiday, but due to events we couldn't come across. But maybe I need to reschedule so I can go to that event. But I don't think I'm ready for it, by the sounds of it. So I might have a little nana nap in the middle of the day. But I think it's going to get to a point where maybe the online stuff will sort of dwindle down a little bit once we can start going to these physical places again. And I think that's going to boom. And I think that then the equilibrium will sort of level itself out in the coming years. I think moving forward with it. So
yeah, I think if nothing else, one thing is proven that this whole shutdown or this whole pandemic has proven is that it is possible to have model railroading, physical, and virtual in the same hand in hand.
Yeah, that's right. And that's where the virtual operations and all that's coming into. I've watched a few videos by Dave Aberlees, which obviously you'd know, and also Gordy. And there's another Australian lad by the name of Brad Anderson I'm talking to in a few weeks that I'd love to have a chat with, because it's now a rabbit hole that I'm going to start going down to see what I can come up with. So that'd be a lot of fun, just playing with the tech side of things and excuse to buy more tech, which is always good. So.
That's always fun, right?
That's right. What's your history to model railroading? How did you get into it?
Yep. So I told you how I got into trains, which was being bedside and then staring at trackside and staring at the trains going by. As far as model railroading, how that all started was actually when I was about maybe 4 or 5-ish. My father actually had bought a train set to kind of for himself, but also for me and my sister to kind of eventually play with. That was at least the thought. But so that evening when he bought it, he set it up on the floor. It was just a basic figure 8. It kind of looped around, came above a bridge and crossed over. Well, the problem is my father tended to run the thing like a slot car. So it was 0 to 100.
Yeah.
And of course, those radius being 18-inch radius, it wasn't exactly designed to handle a train at full speed, so it constantly kept derailing. Yeah. All right, fine, tries again and kept derailing. Needless to say, by the end of that evening, he got frustrated. It ripped it all apart, put it back in the package, and sealed it up. And then I think like the next day or so, he returned it. And it was that was at that point. That's when it became a model railroader, because I wanted a train for myself now. Yeah. Because that opportunity disappeared when my dad returned the train set. So that's how it was my introduction with model railroading. Throughout my childhood, my parents were originally from China. They were I'm first generation born here in the States. Me and my sister were first generation born here in the States. So because they came from China, they also came from a poor village, a farming village. So they never had spare time, and they never really had spare money to afford hobbies. So, with me growing up, me and my sister growing up, they didn't really encourage a hobby, but they also didn't discourage. But because of my love for trains and just my focus for it, my dad we did have a bunch of here in the States, we call them yard sales or garage sales.
Yeah, we have the same. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So whenever there was one, we actually had I think every spring, summer-ish time frame, there's always a town-wide yard sale. So we would always go around and just if there was any trains for sale, if it was like cheap enough, I would eventually my dad would buy me that set. or buy me whatever pieces. So we did come across a yard sale which had a ton of track, and
Nice.
and yes, that was jackpot. That was like the holy grail for me.
Yeah.
So because we had I got all that track, so we just had I didn't have a 4x8 at the time. It was just everything was on the floor. So naturally, when you're tiny, you have a 15 by 15 foot room and you have a boatload of track. What do? Well, fill the room with track, of course. Which worked for all of a few weeks till my parents got tired of stepping on the tracks as he traversed the room.
Yeah.
So eventually, we lived in a planned community. So there were a lot of other constructions going on at the time, and whenever there was some scrap plywood that they were just tossing into the dumpster, so my dad scavenged those, and then we cobbled together some basic bench work, and we put it up, and boom, that's how my 4x8 was started, with all a bunch of scrap plywood from housing construction projects.
Yeah.
And that just, and he said, okay, now that you have a table, get it out of the room. So that's how my first layout was started. This pushed me about grade school, elementary school. So during one of the holiday seasons, we had what we do here is Secret Santa. Basically, the other kids pick a name out of the hat, and they have to buy a gift for that person.
Sure.
Because I was vocal. I was fairly vocal about my love for trains. The person who drew my name actually bought me a track planning book from Atlas.
Yeah.
And that was actually the foundation for my first layouts. And I think I sent you the photo,
the track plan. Yep.
Yeah.
The Yule Central plan. Yep.
That was actually my second one. There was another one. That was from the Atlas book. That was actually the first track plan.
Okay, lovely.
So that was that one. But like any kid, right? After a while, you kind of get bored of it.
Yeah.
So I decided. I gutted everything, ripped it all out, and then for some reason, I don't know why, I went smaller. So the first track plan actually was designed for a 4x8. I went to a 4x6 layout plan, and it was much simpler. Don't ask me why. I have a whole boatload of track, and yet I went simpler.
Yeah.
Figure that one out.
That's the collector in you.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I swung to the opposite end. The first end, there was a lot of track. So it was too much track. Then I swung to little track. So, but now, like I said, I have this pile of track. Well, let me start experimenting with different track plans. And I just took, and that's what I came to the third track plan. And that was pretty much the track plan I had all the way up until I moved out for college. And then my parents sold the house because they became empty nesters. Both me and my sister moved out.
Yeah.
So that was that. And on that third layouts where I actually started playing around with different techniques, right? Following the track plans was pretty straightforward. Again, because my parents didn't encourage the hobby, but they also didn't discourage it. They didn't really invest in the idea of having scenery. So they couldn't understand, why would you want to dirty up a perfectly beautiful brandy new locomotive. So it was, I never really got that far, but it did push me to plan and try different techniques. So on that third layout, I think on one of the track plans, you could see there was originally a mountain range, but I quickly learned if you have a mountain range, then you can't put a yard, and I was running out of space because at this point I had amassed a fairly sizable collection of freight cars, fairly sizable, and they put that in quotes because it was maybe, I think, like a dozen, maybe a little more than that. As opposed
As
to
a
now
youngster, that's sizable.
yeah, exactly. As opposed to the hobby shop that's now behind me.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, so we had that, and I wanted to put a yard in, but I can't have a yard right under the foot of the mountain. So, okay, let's forget about the mountain. Let's raise a track plan and put a lake nearby and connect it with a stream, because I had this bridge that it was an Atlas truss bridge that I really wanted to use. So how could I use it? Well, let's put a lake and a river in there. And so
Nice.
yeah, so I was playing with that, and then at the same time, I was also starting to play around with the electrical control, block control. How do you get multiple trains running on the same piece of track without conflicting each other? So, so that was pretty much the case all the way up until, like I said, college. Then I came up here to Connecticut. I failed to mention that I was actually originally from New Jersey in growing up. And I was fortunately, it was a specific town. It was Phillipsburg, New Jersey. And why that was so significant was because Phillipsburg was the first town across the Delaware River coming over from Pennsylvania. And a lot of the railroads kind of converged through that point, across the river into Phillipsburg before going out to markets in the east in New York City. So Phillipsburg was actually, it was important because it was a railroading town, and that's what allowed me to see the trains. So I came up here to for college. My sister also, she went out to Phoenix for college, and then so parents became empty nesters. Well, actually, excuse me, let me back up. They were still in New Jersey while both me and my sister were in college. And I did go back in the summer. So I worked on the layout here and there in the summer.
Sure.
But for the most part, when both me and my sister moved out, I came up here for work. And my sister went out to Phoenix because she wanted to stay out there. That's when my parents became empty nesters and then sold the house. But as in part of the house, I think all the track and everything went to the dumpster.
Yeah.
Including that layout. A couple pieces were scavenged, but for the most part, I just went straight to the trash.
Yeah, sure. Favorite? I know we're still on model railroading here, but I think favorite prototype railway or train that you just love looking at, or or just love the look of, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So I actually grew up in Conrail territory, and that's what I remember, seeing the Conrail blue and the locomotives. So, favorite prototype would probably be Conrail.
Sure.
Although more lately, I'm starting to really get the itch for smaller class 3 short lines, little shunting type locomotives and shunting type railroads, because it's just the hodgepodge of everything you get, old and new. Yeah, it's all dumped in one location. Right. And there's the thing about rules is that the rules are there, but they're more of a guideline. You do what you need to do to get the job done.
Make it happen. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's your favorite model train?
Favorite model train?
Or top 4 or 5 then. Because if you're like me, it's probably more than one. So.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, I do predominantly HO scale. So that's it. As far as top models, I would have to probably go with the Ather and Genesis, the SD60s locomotive, especially the SD60Ms, the wide cabs. I think I got one kicking around right here. One of these guys.
Oh, okay. Yep. In Conrail blue.
In Conrail blue.
Conrail blue, yeah. Lovely.
Yeah, I have like 5 or 6 of these, all in various states.
Yeah, sure. Into any steam? Because obviously I see over your back shoulder there's a steam locomotive sitting on the half built on the track, or
yeah. So this is actually, I'm doing a decoder install. This is actually brass. I'm doing this for a friend. It's in a O&W, Oneida Western center cab steam locomotive.
Right. Okay.
So unfortunately, the actual cab part of it, there was some poor solder joints. I don't have soldering capabilities here, so actually I chopped it out to another friend who does. So he's working on that, and I handle the electronics.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's that. I do appreciate steam. Me personally, I'm more of a diesel fan. But there is something nice and relaxing and mesmerizing, quite honestly, about seeing steam. I do have actually a couple steam models kicking around, and I love bringing those to the train shows. Again, for the kids to watch.
Yeah, sure.
Because it is alive. Just it is, the machine is so entertaining but enthralling.
Yeah.
So captivating, because
It's the
spend
romance, I think, of steam as well, isn't it? Sort of all the old classic films like the Orient Express and all that type of thing. It's just the classics. It's great. So
yeah.
Obviously, you've done a few clinics over the time. One of recent times I only watched, I think, was last night, was NMRA on cell phone speakers.
Yep.
Which I've never heard of that concept before until I listened to this clinic. How did this concept sort of come about? Using cell phone speakers, I suppose.
Yeah, as much as I would love to claim the credit for it, actually, I first stumbled across it on a model railroad hobbyist forum. Actually, it wasn't even me who stumbled on it. It was a friend of mine, a coworker, at my previous job. He stumbled across it, and then he basically brought it to my attention. I'm like, that kind of makes sense. I don't see why not. I mean, you're trying to go for high fidelity, right? When you think about your cell phone, you want your sound to be high fidelity, because your phones are more than just a phone, right? It's your media center, it's your YouTube player, your music player, video recorder, all these things. And they have to fit it, although the trend lately has been the opposite, but usually they want to try to fit something into a small package. So it just makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't you? So I got a hold of a couple, tried it. I was like, okay, this is much better than what you can get from any hobby grade speakers. And then they're cheap too. I think that's the most important thing, is that they're so affordable, as opposed to hobby grade speakers, which you're spending double digits at the very minimum to just get the speaker, never mind the enclosure behind it. Yeah, that's right. Versus this is all one engineered package. Hallelujah. And it's smaller, thinner. You can fit it in more interesting spots. Sure. So that's how it all started. But then I was like, interesting. Not too many people know about this, or they're not really doing anything about it. So let me put together a clinic and present it. And that was kind of one of the first times I ever presented. It was for an RPM meet, a prototype meet. We host here in Connecticut. So I put together, and I put that together. I think the first presentation I ever did was 2015. That was the version 1 of that presentation. Right. Okay. And it's still one of those things. Originally, my thought was, okay, I'm going to present it for maybe a couple years and then shelve it because it's going to become old. But it's still, like, a lot of times I get invited to conventions and whatnot. That's still one of the more requested presentations.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I was not expect at the time when I created it. I figured there would be a hype in the beginning, but then it would just peter out. But I was not expecting it to be sustained and continuing to this day. So I've pretty much slowly incremented upon it, but really at the core set of slide is actually the same slides from 2015.
Yeah, nice. Don't want to reinvent the wheel, do we? So it makes it a lot easier.
No,
but, so obviously electronics is your thing. Is there what research and development are you putting in the background of obviously using these speakers? Obviously, as mobile phones, you rightfully say, they're getting bigger and bigger as they were getting smaller and smaller back in when I first had my first phone.
Right.
And obviously everything is getting so much better,
Right.
quality wise. What sort of speakers are you experimenting with now? Because obviously that clinic talks a lot about probably iPhone 4 to maybe 7, I think, purely because of, I think, the phrase you used was oversaturation or something similar, that it's obviously they've become only a few dollars each to buy compared to
Right.
a iPhone 10 or something like that would be
Right.
probably many dollars to buy
Right.
it. So
Yeah.
so what have you done much research and development since to try different speakers and different, if you could talk through that a little bit, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So right now, the popular line is still the iPhone 4s. I think the thing about the iPhone 4s is that because they're all plastic construction, it still allows you to modify it and to fit it to your application without really compromising on the sound quality. But the one drawback about the 4s is that even though they are 1-watt amplifier or 1-watt speakers, the newer generation of decoders, they're putting like more than 2 watts, even though they advertise 2 watts. I'm finding that you're easily pumping out more than 2 watts, and it's cooking a lot of the 4s. So that's when I started moving more towards the iPhone 7. Between the 4 and the 7, the way the speaker was constructed tended to be a little bit wider than than what a Locomotive shell can enable. Not so much when you have a full width cab like this, where literally the width of the shell spans the entire Locomotive.
Sure.
But the narrow hood type locomotives, it was becoming more harder. That's why the 4 is still very much more preferred because of its more narrow profile. But recently I stumbled across the iPhone 7, specifically the 7 Plus. I don't know if you can see it. That's the overall shape. That width is actually the same width of most hood locomotives, so it fits perfectly.
Wow. Nice.
But what I also discovered in just trying out and testing it and really pushing it, the 7 Plus can handle the higher wattage a little bit better, or actually much better than what the iPhone 4 you can do. The only drawback is that because Apple started switching over to more of a metal body construction, so you can't kind of cut into it like you can do with the 4.
The plastics, yeah.
Right. So that's what I've been trying to play with. I've also tried playing with other brands, right? Before I've talked about using a iPhone or Samsung Galaxy 4 speakers, and they work okay for the most part. I don't know why, but they tend to distort and rattle too easily. So I've kind of shied away from the Galaxy stuff. But I've also tried some other cell phone speakers from models that we don't see here in the States, mainly more Chinese models. I'm playing around with different shapes because they have more models than we do. But for the most part, I keep falling back onto the iPhones just in terms of overall sound quality, overall tonality. It just sounds fuller and you get a better audio spectrum than some of the other knockoffs. I have tried playing with the speakers from smartwatches, and they show promise because of the form factor. It's nice and compact, but what I'm struggling to get the amplification out of it. It's very weak. There's no real volume behind it. So,
and be more expensive as well, I would think, as well.
Right. They would be more expensive, but the advantage is it does open it up into N-scale markets.
Very true. Very true.
So, yeah. So that was kind of my goal is we got O-scale, you can use it, but I think at that size you have other options that are maybe a little bit better. HO scale, we definitely got that in the bag. Now, how about N scale? So those guys don't left out.
Yeah. It's very,
So-
as I said, I'd never considered it even using that before. And I think it's something that I've literally got, what have I got here? 3 of them here right now. I'm thinking, what am I going to do with them? I'm thinking, well, I might bust them open for their speakers now, I think, and see what I can do with them. So that'd be quite interesting, just moving forward with that. So another, obviously NMRX, I'll put a link to the video below because that's actually very interesting to it. And if you don't mind, I can put a link up to the slideshow, or would you rather not that being linked up? I'll put it up, maybe put it up on my website or something, and I'll work out with the links where I'll put it. So, and we'll do it that way. So, you've obviously got a little bit of a sense of humour. It comes through in all these clinics, and another one, the hot rod chicken, was. I think you sent me this morning. So can you talk us through that a little bit? Because there's a little bit of tongue in cheek. It's got some quite funny jokes in it. So I'll tell one here. It's an absolute. It's like a real dad joke. I got young kids and they always hate it when I tell Jake jokes. So what kind of chicken grows on trees? Poultry. I thought that was hilarious. I told that to my daughter this morning. She goes, "Oh, Dad, that's terrible." So I think that's hilarious, and there's a few more little clangers in there. I'll tell her tonight, I think. So tell us about the hot rod chicken, because I would have thought transporting chickens, but anything, railways transport anything pretty well, don't they? So, so talk us through that little paper that you wrote, or that slideshow.
So that one actually came about because I have a friend, Dave Ramos, which actually would be phenomenal for the show. I should try to connect you to.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, he models New York Harbor Railroad in 1940-ish, 45, 44, 48, somewhere in that range.
Yep.
So one of the big markets in New York City is for live chickens. And so because of he's modeling New York Harbor in that time frame before real refrigeration was really in vogue, all the shipments to the city was all done live, right? You couldn't slaughter the chicken and then carry it into it because it'll all rot by the time it arrives into the city. So they haul the chickens live. And he wanted to model that operation on his layout, and he wanted to get these chicken cars. Well, chickens are very peculiar animals, right? They're not as hardy as, say, beef or pigs.
Sure.
And they're not as easily handled in live form compared to when they're butchered and packaged. So the railroads back in the day invented this concept where they had, if you put a car, right, fill it with just a bunch of chicken coops, but you put a person in there. So as the train is trotting along the rail lines, that person can actually feed the chicken. They can give the chicken water, and chickens are actually nasty animals. If they sense their neighbor or their companion is injured, they'll go at it and peck at it and attack it. So you don't want to exactly do that, right? You want your chickens all to be alive.
Yeah.
So they need someone to take the dead chickens and chuck them out the door if they're dead, or cook them up and eat them or whatever.
Yeah.
So they came up with this concept where you hauled live chickens. Well, that is actually a very unique thing. We don't really we do have models of it, but my friend Dave, he needed a whole bunch of it, and he couldn't afford the Android kits because they're not that expensive, but you're getting a stick of wood and you build a freight car out of it.
Yeah, okay.
Or the other option is you get overland brass models of the car, which is very expensive, readily available, but very expensive. And he needed, I think he said like 25 or 50 cars, some pretty astronomical numbers. And the way it all started was he came up to me, say, "Hey, you're an engineer. You could do this. I need your help." Fine. And actually, talk about tongue in cheek. In the actual presentation, I have this little back and forth that I set up with him. That runs through. But so that's how I got roped into it. And as I was doing more research and trying to figure out actually doing how to build this model, I came across the whole history behind it. And it was fascinating to see how the railroads, again, in the early 20th century, it's just pure innovative, whatever it takes to get the job done, right?
Yeah,
because
right.
transporting the chickens, you couldn't really take it by car because trucking wasn't really, it's still in its infancy. And in the States in the early 20th century, roads were still all dirt roads. They weren't paved. They weren't organized in the fashion that we see today.
Yeah. Okay.
So the automobile technology was primitive. The road technology was really primitive, but the railroads, well, that's been well established. So, okay, how can we get these chickens in? And that the guy by the name of William Streeter and another guy, they collaborated and came up with this design that eventually evolved into the chicken cars. Well, because cities, right, demand so much of it, any train going into a major city will have a chicken car. And since my friend Dave, like I said, modeled New York Harbor, and New York City has a huge Jewish population, which was a key consumer of live chickens, because it has to be prepared in a kosher manner and so on and so forth.
Sure.
He needed that for his railroad. So out of necessity, he came to me, and then from there, I just became fascinated with it, and then cook it and just started designing the car how I would build it and make it affordable for him to get a whole fleet on his layout. But on the way, I was like, this is so interesting. I would hate to not share this with people. So let me put this together But because there was so much information, it could easily become a history class where it's so easy to put people to sleep. So how do I jazz this up, right? Oh, let me stick in some jokes. And let me stick in some funny like you said, tongue in cheek moments, just to kind of keep people up on their toes, not expecting when to see the next joke.
Yeah. Well, that definitely came through. It was fantastic. I had a good old giggle of that when I was having a read of that this morning. It was fantastic. So it really comes down to, as you rightfully point out, the railways. If there's money in it, they'll work out a way, won't they? So in that way, they are innovators well before their time as well, just to purely get the job done, don't they? It's just with everything absolutely. They do.
And it's funny because during this project, I was in touch with my friend Peter Stempel, who does a lot of 3D printing, but he also does a lot of oddball printing of oddball equipment, because he doesn't really model any. I think he does model like early 1900s railroading, but I found that the pickle car everyone knows about, but there was an oyster car.
Right.
There was a specific freight car that they built to haul oysters, because he lives in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
To haul oysters from the bay into the city. So to your point, if there's money in it, let's do it.
Let's get into it. Oh, I love a good oyster. We have some lovely oysters this part of the world, as well. So.
I never got into oysters. I can't.
I can't. I don't like them just raw. They need to be what we call Kilpatrick here. You probably got something very similar, so it's based. Now we're going to a cooking class, but anyway, we digress. So a little bit of ham and cheese with soy sauce, and then you grill it. So it's actually quite nice that way. Yeah.
Interesting. No, I've not seen that.
Yeah. There's many different ways that we cook them over here, so that's fine. So what's currently on your workbench? What are you currently working on?
Well, right now most of my stuff is interestingly enough, installs for other people. Yeah, that's been pretty much my things lately. Is just doing a bunch of installs. I've also some is actually public knowledge now, but I've also taken on a part-time role with Rapido, doing repairs, handling their warranty repair. So between the two, that's actually keeping my workbench pretty full. Sure. With projects. But a couple immediate projects that are my personal projects. One, I think I sent you this work scope. Our buddy Lionel Strang, he used to have the Allegheny and Lackawanna Southern, his own railroad. Well, he
Sure.
had a couple locomotives that the decoders are so old. They were Rangro decoders, which was pre-NCE.
Right. Okay.
But they were so old that JMRI wouldn't recognize them. So,
Okay.
so he sent them my way to get them updated. But along the way, because of my love with, like I said earlier, of Class 3 railroads and how they just kind of hodgepodge old and new, I had the bright idea, well, what if the railroad continued to today,
Yeah.
and they have these aging locomotives and they need to update it? Well, that gives me what they would probably rebuild it. If they rebuild it, what it would look like.
Yeah.
And that's one of the projects I did. I grabbed a GP7 from a website called Trainiacs, done guy by the name of Michael Ebby. He does a lot of these MS Paint drawings of different locomotives.
Right. Okay.
It's scaled. They're not just
Wow.
arbitrary. It's actually scaled. Yeah, and I actually have used his drawings to reference whether a certain part needed to be this dimension or that dimension, because he actually put in the research. So, well, why do the same research? Why not use what he's got?
Exactly.
Right?
Makes
Don't
sense.
why reinvent the wheel?
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. So I took that a drawing of a GP7 and I started cobbling together. Well, the first thing they would probably get rid of is the high hood, right? They would probably chop the nose. Well, rather than try to rebuild that, they would probably just say, well, we have a scrap EMD nose and cab from a GP38 that they had lying around, so let's graft that in. Well, if they did that, then that means they also would probably update the prime mover and so on and so forth. And so that drawing was actually the end result of what I think the railroad would have done.
Wow.
So now I'm going to start building it, right?
Yeah, sure.
Using Canon parts, using a different all sorts of third-party detail parts to build it up from the ground up.
Yeah, nice.
So
nice.
it was a standard Atlas GP7, but by the time I'm done with it, it's gonna be a Franken monster.
That's fantastic. I like that. So I'll have to have a better look at that photo. Actually, that you sent. That's great. So now, modelling influences, sort of the people that give you the fire in the belly, and they've taught you a lot. Who would they be, do you think?
In the beginning, I actually, growing up, I had a next door neighbor who had a 3-rail Lionel setup in his basement, right? It wasn't just a towing train. No, it was an actual legitimate, fully scenic and everything layout that spanned the decent amount of his basement. I think it was I want to say it was maybe 15 feet wide by 20 or 30 feet deep.
Sure.
So that was my first exposure to actually model railroading that's beyond just having track on plywood, right? It exposed to me that you can do more with scenery.
Sure.
So that was my first influence. But as I grew older, I kind of shied away from the layout building and really got more into the model building side of things. I built, aside from model trains, one of the other things I love building is model Titanics.
Wow,
I think I built, yeah. Right now I'm working on a 1/200th kit, a monster kit. But prior to that, I built several of the old Revell kits that you can find. Yep. You can find in most craft stores, actually, and even department stores. But so I kind of really enjoyed model building more so than layout building. And one of my early influences was by a fellow named of Brian Bana, who does very, very intricate modeling.
Sure.
And he really models things to the prototype. Like he'll take a chassis and mill it down so that it's actually truly scale width. And his work is just amazing. Yeah, he does phenomenal work. So he was my early influence all throughout the college years. But now, kind of coming back in full circle, really picking up with the photography. Another gentleman, actually a couple gentlemen, Mike Rose, Ken Karlowitz, and Ted Pamperin. All these gentlemen have phenomenal layouts that are very detailed and very scenic. So that's been kind of my influence a lot lately, is to have, and that's kind of why my current layout design is actually going to be much smaller than I originally had envisioned. I originally was going to envision like a major Class 1 railroad where there's main line, lots of trains running to and from staging, that type of thing. But I've really, aside from the fact that I live in a smaller house, I've really focused onto more of that third class short lines, because it allows me to finish it, but get those mostly highly detailed scenes that you found like Ken Karlowitz and Mike Rose. Those guys all have.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I've got quite a large layout, but I'll never get to the detail of some of those gentlemen, you know, like your George Celios, and there's just amazing top layouts.
Exactly.
What I've seen. So one Lionel Strang, we'll finish off on him, the self-professed evil overlord of the AML network. This is a very, very, very tongue-in-cheek. How do you control him? You seem to be the only person that he sort of, yes, Kaylee, no, Kaylee type thing. Everyone else he sort of walks over the top of to a certain degree, and maybe Bruce might be the other one. But you're definitely, when you're on, it's just like, it's always Lionel's on his best behaviour. I'd like to know how you do that.
Well, I would love to say that there's some womanly charms. No, I'm just kidding. No, he's awesome. He's phenomenal. He's a lot of fun. But I think that I don't know. That's a good point. Well, maybe it's just because I just like let him run like a toddler, let him burn out his energy, and then it's like, okay, now I can control.
Okay, now we'll talk about trains. Okay. So I'll he's in my sights. I'll have him on one day, so he's going to be on the other end of the microphone at some stage. So we'll see how that plays out for me. So, being a very busy man, I understand. So, all right. So
just make sure you burn out his energy first, and then
that's right. Let it. Yeah, that's okay. I'll write that down actually.
It's like a little puppy.
Yeah.
And then there you go.
Just throw the ball to him. Come on, Lionel.
Right.
Come on. He'll probably get stuck into me now, but that's fine.
Yeah,
I'm an Australian. Everyone gets stuck into Australia. So, Kaylee, thank you so much for spending nearly an hour with us today. Great conversation about various different parts of who you are as a person, as a modeler. It's been fantastic little insight on all that. So thank you very much for taking the time away from your modeling.
For having me.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I'd definitely love to have you back on at some stage and maybe hone in on just one of those, if, you know, maybe one of the NMRA clinics or something like that would be great. So thank you again. Yeah,
my pleasure. Thank you.
Make sure you subscribe. Click that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming videos. Support us on Patreon. Like us on Facebook and Instagram at Model Railroad Technique.